So this one time I went to a website called tvtropes.org, and about 17 hours later I've been rendered completely incapable of enjoying fiction in any medium. For months I prowled movie theaters and bookstores as a genre-savvy snark knight, carrying a willing suspension of disbelief with a Mohs hardness of one. But then I stumbled across a book called American Gods by Neil Gaiman, and somehow I managed to punch through my encrusted shell of overanalysis and turn off everything but my enjoyment switches, effectively rescuing me from an oblivion of disenchanted jerkassness. It's a story that uses a kind of dream logic to build an inventive, atypical plot structure that resists trope-laden predictability. Tropes are all about expectations after all, and in addition to wrestling with plot-related expectations, the book also touches on something much more important: how we build expectations of other human beings. Hey, you, I recognize that look in your eye. You haven't read this book, have you? Don't you know that this review has 16 metric tons of spoilers hanging out the back end? Get yourself to a bookstore and buy this book now. It's good. Read it, come back. Seriously, we'll wait for you if we have to. Don't worry, we're not really going to wait. As soon as they're gone, we'll get started. They'll just have to get the notes from someone else. So anyway, as a recap, American Gods follows the journey of Shadow, an ex-con and nominee for 2001's Most Deadpan Protagonist Award, who was released from prison on the same day as his wife's untimely death. On his way to her funeral, he runs into a mysterious man named Mr. Wednesday, whom I can't help but imagine is the most interesting man in the world. Mr. Wednesday offers Shadow a nebulous job, and the two set off to collect a bunch of other rather mysterious fellows and fellowettes who are all actually down on their luck gods from various pantheons and folklore. While Wednesday insists that he's rallying the old gods to overthrow the new deities of planes, trains, and automobiles, he's actually chess mastering an elaborate Batman's gambit to suck the blood energy from the deicidal battlefield and become more powerful than you could ever imagine, and boy howdy was that a spoiler. I hope all the innocent minds got out in time. So how exactly does this god suck energy leech thing work? Well, there's a hand wave with the battle being dedicated to Wednesday, and an explanation that Odin thrives on blood sacrifice, and some shenanigans in, around, and across the grave, but it doesn't really matter. It's magic. Dream logic. In fact, I think that one of the things that lends American Gods its shell-smashing power is Gaiman's use of dream logic over conventional narrative causality. See, there's basically two ways to structure fiction. The first and most common is straight-up empirical causality. This very Western Newtonian approach to storytelling drives the plot forward through a string of causes and effects. It's satisfying because we can anticipate the ramifications of a character's actions, and we know that decisions have a domino effect because we understand the rules that are in play. Dream logic is a much trickier animal, and it's a hell of a lot easier to screw up. Under dream logic, either the rules are tossed out the window completely, or they're strange and alien and locked up in a box somewhere we don't have access to. Sometimes dream logic can make an audience wave their BS flag, but dream logic courses strong through the veins of our mythology and folklore. We're less bothered by the illogical or unexplainable when we're dealing with a context that is already best chums with dream logic. So when Shadow tosses a gold coin he got from a leprechaun into his wife's grave, and she inexplicably shows up all zombified and gets a night shift at the local 7-Eleven, we just kind of roll with it, and it contributes to the tone and depth of the fictional world. Also, at the end of the book, Shadow goes through a kind of path to rebirth spirit quest while hanging on a tree, and we're willing to accept that the events in this dream state have weight and consequence because the structure of the experience resonates with fairy tales and legends. We understand that the story elements are mythical in nature, so we're okay with the lateral causality that governs them. But what's most interesting to me is that after Gaiman convinces his audience to forego linear causality, at least in some cases, he uses this logical unboundedness to build unpredictability and unusual plot structures. For instance, the apex of American Gods is surprisingly anticlimactic. Wednesday's whole diabolical plan goes tits up with a speech for tolerance from Shadow, and the storm foreshadowed for 500 pages blows over with only some mild hail damage and a down limb in the front yard. However, as things settle down and we swing into the denouement, whole scatterings of pieces you weren't really paying attention to start snapping together like magnets, and Shadow finds himself racing to solve a Chekhov's murder mystery and face off with a bloodthirsty god who's been preying on a small town for centuries. The result is a refreshing build-up, let-down, fight to the finish structure that puts the nail-biter pages in the denouement instead of the climax proper. It's a risky move that defies the conventional expectations of tension, and we're prepped to receive an atypical ending like this through the consistent use of unexpected causality throughout the book in smaller instances. This build-up of dream logic keeps the closing events from feeling unbalanced and out of place. But hey, we haven't given Shadow much attention. Let's look at him. Man, he's stiff, isn't he? I mean, look how he hardly reacted to his wife's death. Does he have any emotions at all? Why do we care about him? While Stephen King might have thrown us right into the maelstrom of emotions behind Shadow's cool exterior, Gaiman paints the characters' actions and lets us infer what's going on in their head. Shadow does have emotions, strong ones, especially towards his wife, but he's a careful man, and when he's presented with conflicting feelings, he wrestles through them quietly instead of lashing out, and he never presumes to understand another person or situation based on appearances. This virtue doubles as a flaw because his unwillingness to pass judgment makes him gullible, and therefore more vulnerable to Wednesday's manipulation. Which leads me to my favorite thing about American Gods. The book, like its protagonist, refuses to define people primarily by culture or race. Like its plot, the characters resist the reader formulating superficial expectations. When we first encounter characters, we aren't immediately given surface tags like she's black or he's gay. In other fiction, when readers stroll across a detail like that right off the bat, they often pull out simplistic paper dolls representing a black person or a gay person or what have you. When they receive additional information about the character, they scribble the contrasting details on the paper doll and assume the rest falls to stereotype. What I like about Gaiman is that he won't let you play with your paper dolls. In American Gods, people have commonality in their humanity and cannot be helpfully categorized by, say, skin tone or an inclination to tongue balls. Our differences are born out of our personality personalities and the decisions that we make, not our origins or physical characteristics, although these may play a role in determining how we interact with surrounding society. This isn't really even a theme of the book, it's just an element borne out through Gaiman's approach to character, and really there's no better way to address an idea like this. It's cast alongside, seeds sown into the mind. A good example lies in the Somewhere in America vignette about Salim, the displaced salesman who encounters a taxi-driving Ifrit in perhaps the most achingly human thread in the entire novel. What's most important is not Salim's familiarity with turbans or secret fabulousness, but rather his nearly cosmic isolation. Petty details of his identity resonate with this focal traffic jam of emotion rather than define him as a human being. The result of this approach to character building is that I can't help but see Neil Gaiman as someone who just genuinely loves people, and honestly, that attribute makes me want to read more by him.
Some shaky modern saviors have now been